So welcome back, everybody. Firstly, today's Yud-Tes Kislev, Yud Yontif, as it's known to be Rosh Hashanah l'Chasidus. It should be Rosh Hashanah Teva Tikoseva L'Sechasenu, which is written and inscribed in a good and sweet year, and to have a year of passion, which this is the great contribution of the Yud-Tes Kislev, which is represented namely by the Tanya Chasidus in general and Tanya in particular, which was meant to ultimately allow the person throughout his journey, and sometimes a complicated journey of life, and without any specific complications, the journey in life as the neshama enters into a body, into Olam Hazeh, into this physical world, which there's always challenges and obstacles, and this was the point of Chassidus, Eir v'chayis nafshenu nitan lanu, light and life, vitality, passion and Torah mitzvahs, despite the being submerged and or perhaps anchored into the realities of Olam Hazeh, a person is able to stay focused on his mandate, Alei Adomis, in this world, which is a point of Eir v'chayis. It's not something which is new. It's just the Torah is given on Har Sinai thousands of years ago. The point of Chassidus was this little expression of Eir v'chayis nafshenu litan lanu, very brief. You have everything, the light doesn't create anything new. It just opens up to the light that we're able to see what exists. And similarly, chayis, life, vitality, you have somebody who is complete, and on the surface you can't see the difference between, even if he's lifeless, all the limbs and everything is there. But so chayis is something which again brings life in something which pre-exists. And similar life and light. So this is the point of Chassidus, nothing new, but it takes the same Torah and infuses such Eir and such Chayis. So this is a day of Eir Chayis Nafshenu Nitan Lanu. We should be written and inscribed in Hoshana Teva Mesukah. We should be able to B'tech Simcha V'tuv Livav, joy and elation and gladness of heart, and with namely with passion, together with passion, continue to serve the Beirei Olam HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again with maintain our focus, our important mandate of making this world a dira, a home and abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So as we continue, we'll hope that maybe perhaps today we'll be able to finish this long chapter of Chavtes. It's been, I believe that there was most classes on a particular Pedic, but again we look forward finishing this Pedic today. So we're holding on page 74. You could see the corresponding English text as well. So we were holding by the Ukamesh Matzinu Dover Zem Furish B'Meraglim B'Teira, rather. As we find this explicit in the Torah, what do we find? This again, everybody's welcome to look back at the previous classes. And again, focusing specifically, and in this case, focusing on the previous classes which deal with this subject, which the Alter Rebbe has conveyed and brings a proof to this, or demonstrates this very point in the Torah when it comes to the Meraglim. You could see it in the previous classes on the koshertube.com, as well as the TanyaOnline.com, with the advantage that there is has the text as well, very organized class by class. And again, the website is solely about this class of the Tanya. So what the Alter Rebbe basically conveyed in the previous classes was, and again for this he's trying to show, to prove, and to relate to us this above mentioned, how it's explicit, or point out how it's explicit in Torah by the story, by the episode of the Meraglim. So the Alter Rebbe points out that in the end of the day, the stand-up of Klip and Sitra Achra, it's all about chutzpah, the voice, the opinion, the determination. It's a chutzpah, like the pasuk says, "Tagbia kanesher misham aritchon Hashem." If you'll arouse yourself like you'll arise rather like a eagle. From there, I'll bring you down. Because this arising of klipa, sitra achron, and the voices and the opinions and the signals of the spirit of impurity is all about chutzpah, because ultimately Enid Mulvade, it's about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem's objective, Hashem's goals. But who brings down, so again the pasuk says, Mishem eritcha Hashem, I'll bring you right down. But who causes this eritcha? On the heaven, on high, the cause of the eritcha, is the bringing down, the klipa and the sitra achra, on high is caused by the yid below. When the yid makes that, when yid is able to stay focused and understand that it's a wave of cheshech, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the ability for this darkness to confront and to challenge the yid in his avodas Hashem, despite that it has a great force and a great potency, because as Alter Rebbe pointed out, that this is a force which vitalizes so many parts of Ilam Haza. Everything which is formerly impure receives its life and energy from these keiches, these impure forces. As we again elaborated on this in the previous class, explained this above mentioned this ladder clearly. And together with that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed this darkness to test and to challenge and to place obstacles in front of man, in front of the Yid, in his Avodas Hashem, in front of anybody, and particularly the Yid in his Avodas Hashem. Yet the Yid knows that it's all about Cheshech, and I just have to turn on a light, and I have to stand with my determination. I have to stand with my, with focus on the objective and goal, why I'm here. In other words, to further implement my determination that I will go on despite the cheshech, despite the darkness, despite this obscurity, unable to stand with clarity and determination, to continue my learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. With that, I open up a light, and immediately the cheshech is gone. It says, even though cheshech could be darkness, could be very intimidating, but how do you fight darkness? You just strike a match, you open a flashlight, the darkness dissipates completely. And momentarily, you dispel darkness with light. So in the outset, it can be very intimidating, and it is. But once you turn on a light, it ultimately, you dispel it, and ultimately it disappears at once. So when the Yid does this down here, and he's able to stand with that sense of clarity and determination as Avodas Hashem. So he annuls, he opens a light, he dispels the darkness on this level, but consequently and instantaneously, on high as well, Misham eritchon Hashem. It arises with chutzpah, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings it down. Because in the end of the day, it's all about chutzpah. Because that's the point of chutzpah. Chutzpah says that everything's very clear. You know, someone's chutzpahdik in a certain class, and what do you think you're doing? Which means there's nothing to stand up for, and there's nothing to oppose. Everything is clear, we're learning, everybody's participating, and someone stands up with chutzpah. That's the point, or a student, or any... What's the point? The point is that everything was okay, everything was normal. It was truly normal. You get up just with chutzpah. So chutzpah has to be just put in its place. Similarly, elokus, godliness, God and godliness, that is what is real. Anything which stands up to God and godliness by virtue is chutzpah. Hashem will bring down that chutzpah. So again, we expounded on this idea past classes, but in this case, it's worthwhile perhaps to see the previous class in order to understand where the Alter Rebbe is going with this. But the Alter Rebbe says we see this all explicit in Torah. By the Meraglim, by the spies, famous spies, they went into Israel. They were sent by Moshe Rabbeinu to scout Eretz Yisrael, as to give the Yidden the report prior to entering Eretz Yisrael. Or that was the plan. When Yidden came out of Mitzrayim, they were supposed to immediately after Matan Torah go into Eretz Yisrael. So he sends the spies, and they come back with this terrible report. And unfortunately, this caused chaos, and this caused catastrophe. And unfortunately, it caused further catastrophe also, This was the night of Tisha B'Av. As we know, Kadosh Baruch Hu said, "You're crying in vain tonight. This will be an evening that you will cry generations to come." Unfortunately, we're still recuperating from that very incident of the Meraglim. So it had been a very, by definition, a very sad story, which at the time, but as well, brought consequences to generations to come. Unfortunately, we hope we come out of it very soon, as we come back into Eretz Yisrael Hashleima, complete Eretz Yisrael together with Mashiach. But in the story of the Meraglim, when they came back with that report, what did they say? Not only they said that the kings, the monarchs, the society in Eretz Yisrael are mighty, robust, strong, gigantic, and it's impossible for us to conquer them. And they came back with a very intimidating, or a scenario which was very intimidating. But one of the things they said, "Ki chazaku mimenu." These people are very strong. Mimenu, which can have two connotations. Mimenu could mean from us, as the Jewish people. But Mimenu also, as the Talmud tells us, they were referring to as well Mimenu, which we could refer to a third party, a singular third party, which is referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They said that Chazak, that the strength and energy in Eretz Yisrael is stronger, more than even stronger rather than HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. God forbid. Like the Gemara says, Atikra Mimenu. And again, the Gemara learns from the word Mimenu, they're referring nothing, believe it or not, they're referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Or the unbelievable, they were referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. They didn't believe, or this was the message they expressed to Am Yisrael, of a disbelief in, not believing in the ability of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to conquer the might and the forces of Eretz Yisrael. And that's what happened. But if you look further in the pasuk, after the incident, after Kadosh Baruch Hu demonstrated his wrath, his charein af, Rachmana litzlan, as a genuine charein af, which Kadosh Baruch Hu says demonstrate his anger towards the Meraglim themselves and towards Am Yisrael, as we just mentioned before, the different expressions of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, namely as translated in the Talmud by our sages of blessed memory, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's the formal rebuke HaKadosh Baruch Hu has of the Jewish people, the need, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu established that the Jewish people will be in the desert for another 40 years, corresponding to the 40 days that the Meraglim despise were in Eretz Yisrael, Yom Lashana, every day corresponding to another year. And it was not when the Jewish people, and other things which took place then, if we know this, remember the story with the Meraglim themselves, as they were their penalty, their punishment. So after HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrated his wrath to Am Yisrael, if you look further in the pasuk, they all gathered together and they said, with inner regret and inner remorse, they all gathered and they said, "We're going. We are going." And not only that, they started ascending the mountain towards Eretz Yisrael. And we know in the end, it was too little, too late, as the expression goes. And Yidden do not have their own hatzlach, their own success. Whatever they do, they have to have the Yad Hashem, and the hand of Hashem was not with them. And unfortunately, they were defeated. But what Alter Rebbe is trying to point out over here, that after Kadosh Baruch Hu reacted to this whole episode of the Meraglim, or to the whole report of the Meraglim, and the reaction of Am Yisrael, they all gathered and they said, "Hinenu v'alinu," that we're all going. We're going up to Eretz Yisrael. And the question begs, didn't you say that it's a place that it's so strong and so mighty that God himself cannot handle, that God himself cannot override the strength and triumph and override and be victorious over the strength and the might of those who represented, of the forces who were in Eretz Yisrael and represented the might of Eretz Yisrael? What is this Hinenu v'alinu? It's like a fire. This fire is going to be able to consume everybody who settles into the fire. So stay away from the fire. And then all of a sudden, we're entering to the fire and we're secure and we're certain that the fire's not going to burn us up. You just said it's fire. And fire burns and fire consumes. So what are you jumping into the fire? You just pointed out clearly to yourself and to everybody that this fire will consume you. So what is this Hinenu Valinu? Why are you going into that same fire which you just said that it's a fire that consumes? You just said HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot handle them, which means that if we'll enter Yisrael, we will lose the war. So why did they all gather and says Hinenu Valinu, the same people who cried and said it's impossible for God even to handle these mighty enemies and giants and so on? So why are they saying Hinenu Valinu? And they started heading towards Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't they just verbally said we are going. They started heading towards Yisrael. What are you heading to Eretz Yisrael? If you just said yourself, and you got to convince everybody, and or all those who were convinced on the matter, why are they saying Hinenu Valinu? God can't handle it, so stay put in your place. Which tells us that when they said Hinenu Valinu, they did believe that it'll be all right and okay. So at what point did their faith come back? Hashem, in God's strength and ability. Moshe Rabbeinu at the time did not demonstrate to the Jewish people any sign, any wonder, any miracle, in time, in between. In other words, as this whole incident was unfolding, to say that they saw this godly, new, great miracle, which they said, nah, God could do it. Look at his might. Generally, the point of a miracle is kind of to remind us, because there's always a part of us who knows the Yichelus Hashem. But a good miracle, a person experienced a good miracle, a new light opens up. But in this case, there was no new light opened up. Moshe Rabbeinu did not show them any new miracle, which should again convince them perhaps to retract, to convince them that it will be okay, and retract in the previous words. So what all of a sudden did they start believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? You just said, or you were just convinced that God cannot do it. God cannot do it. Rachmana litzlan, God forbid. And the answer is, Moshe Rabbeinu told them, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu got angry at them. That he promised, he swore that he's not going to bring them into Eretz Yisrael. He's not going to bring them. So that's what happened in between. And that's what they said, Hinenu Valinu, we're going up to Eretz Yisrael. And the question is, what is that help? If they did not believe in the ability, in the koach, in the strength of God Himself to conquer the 31 kings, and we know the 31 kings were dominant in Eretz Yisrael at the time, and if God cannot conquer the 31 kings in Eretz Yisrael, what did that help? The fact that Moshe Rabbeinu relates to them that Hashem is angry and Hashem swore that He's not going to bring you into Eretz Yisrael, only your children will enter Eretz Yisrael. Again, as the parsha relates to us, when Moshe Rabbeinu conveyed in the name of Hashem that you are not going into Eretz Yisrael, it's your children going into Eretz Yisrael, and it'll be not today, not tomorrow, not a year later, not a decade later, it'll be 40 years later. So you heard that, and you know Hashem is upset at you. But if you fundamentally do not believe that God could do it, that God has the ability to override these 31 kings which were present in Eretz Yisrael at the time. So what does that information help you change your mind that at this point we know God can do it? Why does that information or that experiencing this the anger of Hashem, or hearing learning of the anger and the wrath of Hashem and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's oath that He's not going to bring Eretz Yisrael, what does that change your opinion on the ground of God's ability to override the 31 kings? He can't. So what are you saying? Let's go. Why are you heading towards Eretz Yisrael, which you just established that HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot override these 31 kings? God forbid. And that's the reason why you demonstrated that you don't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, because of that very notion. We will not be successful, because God forbid, cannot do it. So what happened? What happened all of a sudden? And the answer is that this is the point. The darkness doesn't have its own kayach. It's about the absence of light, and it could be very intimidating. and it could present an enormous obstacle in our sense of clarity, in our straightforward thinking. And that's the point of chutzpah. The chutzpah is something which is irrational. And as he goes on over here and he's explaining the levada, it's certain. Yidden, by definition, are believers, sons of believers. And in essence, every single Yid believes in the Eibishter on a constant basis. And he knows the Eibishter is a koil yochel, that he can do everything and anything at any given time. Because he is God. It could be 31 kings or 31,000 kings or more. If God decides to override, obviously it happens in a very quick time, and it could even be in a very miraculous manner. Because he's God, and a Yid believes in God. For the Yid, a Yid by definition is a mind in the mind. Yidden in a whole are called maminim b'nei maminim. The believers, the sons of believers. And the problem was at this point, the energy, negative energy, the impure energy which is invested in their body, arose on the light and the purity and the emes of the sanctity of their godly soul, begasas rucho, begabhuso, bechutzpa b'litam vadas, with its crassness, with its ego, with its haughtiness, its narcissism, with chutzpah, with audacity, with a audacious reaction without any rationale, without any reason, without any knowledge, b'litam vadas. And that's what happened. And that obscured the purity, the emes of the Yid. A Yid doesn't really need a miracle if you're looking on his core essence. His core essence is one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So by definition, he's a maimon, he believes in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just the chutzpah, the darkness, the obscure, the presentation, obscure presentation of the nefesh, of the sitra achra, of klipa, the negative forces, which rise like with chutzpah over the emes of, and the ein and the lichtigkeit and the light and the purity and the clarity of the which is the purity of the nefesh elikis, of the godly soul, and the clarity which the godly soul constantly maintains. And therefore, at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu just had to bring down that chutzpah. And how did HaKadosh Baruch Hu bring down the chutzpah? Or rather, as the expression of the Alter Rebbe, and therefore, miyat shekotzav Hashem aleim, right when HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrated his anger on them, v'hirim b'kil rash v'regez, and he screamed, if you will, use the expression, with a strong, loud, and an angry voice on them, on Am Yisrael. Ad masay leidahara hazay, says the expression of the pasuk, is till when, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, until when with this evil or bad congregation continue to tantalize me and my presence and my kedusha, and be a constant disturbance, an obstacle, a challenge to my divine plan in bringing the community to Eretz Yisrael. But midbar hazeh yiplu pigreichem, as the pasuk says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, in this desert your corpse will fall. Ani Hashem dibartim leizeis es, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu swears to that, that they are not going to Eretz Yisrael, etc., as the continuous psukim verses in this very chapter. So at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it in a way of shvur. And when Yidden heard these very difficult words, these very strong words, these very clear and determined words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nichna v'nishbar libam b'kirbam, that is what subdued and subjugated and nishbar is broke, shattered their heart within themselves, within their midst, b'kirbam, within themselves. Kidiksiv, like it says, v'yis'adlu ha'am ma'ed, they mourned very much. And once they were nishbar, once you brought down the chutzpah, once you brought down that nesha, that eagle, which is the impure forces which arise like chutzpah misham eritchunum Hashem, it's brought down. What remains? What remains when you open a light? What remains is that you see with 100% clarity what truly is. Everything is there before you. Walk into a dark room, like we learned before. We said no before. which is again associated with the specialty of today's day. Everything is there before. Again, we said in the context of Teda Mitzvah is nothing new. Chassidus didn't come to point out something new. It came to open the light to see with clarity what truly exists and what truly is. But let's apply it to what we're really, not to go off. No, let's rather apply it. This is the same point, but let's rather apply it to this paragraph here. That when you open a light, there's nothing new happens in the room. You have a room which was full of beautiful furniture, and a room a pleasant room which entering would on its own be very pleasant. There is a nice furniture and chairs and tables and couches and everything it's a pleasant room to be. But when the light is off, you don't see what is. You don't see the truth. You don't see what is real. It's dark. And again, maybe even intimidating to walk in there. The moment the light goes on, the moment you dispel the darkness, nothing new happened. It just, whatever it was 2 minutes before, remains there. It continues to be in the same exact form and fashion at this time. The good thing is you're able to, or the difference is you're able to see it, able to identify it, but nothing new happened. Nothing has changed. The Jew is a believer, the son of a believer, and he knows about the Koach B'Chelis Hashem at all times, because that's who he is. It's not something new. The essence of the Yid is the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chelik L'Kamimal, it's a part of God. Consequently, he believes as a Maimin Ben Maimin. So everything, so the emes of the Yid is about Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The problem is that it's darkened and it's obscured and eclipsed with this whole presentation of the Sitra Achra, but it's about chutzpah. It's an irrational chutzpah. It's an audacious chutzpah which rises like an intimidating darkness. Open the light, bring out dispel the darkness. All of a sudden you see the true picture of what really existed all along. And that's what happened. Moshe didn't have to show them a miracle. Hayid is a Maimin Ben Maimin. What Moshe Rabbeinu, again, through the message of these psukim, or the message of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is in these psukim, in these verses, what happened was HaKadosh Baruch Hu just brought down that chutzpah. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu demonstrated that anger, his godly anger, his genuine anger towards Am Yisrael, what it did just brought down the chutzpah. It removed the darkness. What remained was the good old Yid, the Maimin Ben Maimin. If he's a Maimin Ben Maimin, automatically he says, Hinenu Valinu, I believe, God, you can do it. Let's go to Eretz Yisrael. I so regret, and I have such remorse on what happened in this last, how long it lasted, hour or so. However long it lasted, the whole episode with Meraglim, in other words, upon their return. As per their return. Once the Kodesh Baruch Hu brought down the chutzpah, the Yid automatically says, Hinenu Valinu. But how are we going to handle it? Sure, we're going to handle it, because God has the ability to do anything, at any time. So Hinenu Valinu, we're going to Eretz Yisrael. And they started heading towards Eretz Yisrael. Again, it wasn't just a verbal proclamation, but they started heading towards Eretz Yisrael with a strong and clear belief, and again that sense of purity and clarity that if it's God, sure, he could do anything. The problem was, in the end, the Kodesh Baruch Hu was not with them, and it was too little, too late. So as the story continues, but from the Yid's perspective, they mourned very much, and when they mourned in their heart, they had a broken heart and a broken spirit. Memela, consequently, the energies and force of impurity fell from their gavhos, from their or memshalto, from their dominance, and they were crushed from their dominance, and begavhusa, and from their gavhus, which means from their haughtiness, or from their uprisal, and the crassness of spirit, instantly came down on this level, and again similarly or simultaneously or instantaneously on high. The Sitra Achra has come down from its memshala, its gavhusa and gasas rucha. So what remains? remains as that pure Yidele. Yidden believe and continue to believe to the extent they say Hinenu Valinu, because we have a God, a great God, and a God which, by definition, could do and he can do and can triumph at any time, in any state, in any situation, at any time. And what is the lesson? What would you learn from here? That every Yid, every person could learn from this whole story and from the whole message, namely from this whole message, that it's not something, the Emunah and Hashem, believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is not another layer which you have to introduce, or you have to place upon the Yid, or you have to introduce to the Yid. This is who the Yid essentially is, which is a total different idea. In other words, a Yid has to be maimed to find Emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by definition, doesn't really have to perform a miracle. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it periodically anyways, because he wants to elicit within us not only our emunah on core essential levels, but he wants us to see and walk together along with him, and to see his presence on a constant basis, and consequently extract from ourselves more and more passion in our connection to him, capital H, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to God, by our learning Torah and our doing mitzvahs and our davening and our doing milas chasadim. So he does that again. We know HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that individually, as we all know it if we're only honest with ourselves. Probably doesn't go through it 24 hours. A person with a straight, healthy focus does not see the hashgacha pratis, the clear divine providence in his own life. Besides the fact knowing that everything is about God, and everything is God, and God is everything, because as it says, there's nothing else. It's the energy of God which continues not only in the 6 days of creation, but Kodesh Baruch Hu's energy is the soul energy which continues on an ongoing basis. Kodesh Baruch Hu continues to infuse in creation not only every day, every second, every moment. Kodesh Baruch Hu continues to infuse his creation, his energy, which ultimately bring creation into being from a state of ayi into a state of yesh, from nothing into something on a constant basis. Hence the only reality is the godly reality. He knows that deep in his soul. But more than that, a Yid, if he's only honest with him, he sees, he experiences, he's able to pinpoint with his finger, wow, that was hashgacha pratis, what divine providence, on a personal basis, and a communal basis, and all of Am Yisrael as a whole. HaKadosh Baruch Hu so often throws in these overt hashgacha pratis, and overt means to say that we can see them with our own physical eye. This was nothing less than a divine intervention. And many times grand miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu appreciates so much to do for the Yid, because he wants, again, the Yid to be connected, to continue to walk along with him in this derech HaMelech, in the way of Torah mitzvahs, again with chayis and passion. But a Yid really, by definition, really doesn't even need those miracles to be a maimin b'maimin, because be'etzem, that's who he is. So if a person has sveikus and emunah, this is the message. When a person has doubts in the faith of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in his faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in God, which periodically happens as we're human being, especially we have a nefesh bahamis, an animal soul, which continues to constantly throw its own signals. Again, it's signals which disturb us in our learning Torah, in our davening. Again, it means us to be laid back when it comes to doing what Hashem wants, or God forbid, to violate something, to do something, or to speak something, or think something, to look in a place which HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in places where HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not want us, again, to do, to speak, to think, to look, etc., etc. So he constantly sends us the signals, and but the Yetzer Tov has to always is told to it. This is our mandate to triumph over the Yetzer Hara. So part of it, and again, to his thought, speech, and action, or his action, speech, or even thought should be completely aligned with the Ratzon Hashem, with the will of God, but together with the package, with the signals of the Yetzer Hara sends us. He then periodically sends us signals which obscure the emes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which place doubts, throws a suffix, a doubt in our emunah. Is there a God? Chas v'shalom. Or he doesn't go there. From he knows he goes there, but is God really looking? God really knows. Does God have really the ability to do that? Could he save me? Could he cure me? Could he bring me my parnasa? Or God forbid not. That's called Sveikus and Emunah. Not Chas v'Shalom questions even the reality of Hashem, but does God permeate this whole reality? Can He really make a difference to me? Or maybe, God forbid, the opposite. So this is part of the signals of the Yetzer Hara. It's not changing your suffix. It's not the real you. A Yid never has Sveikus and Emunah. A Yid never has doubts in faith. And therefore, if you think, how do we counter Sveikus and Emunah? When a person has doubts in Emunah, it's not that he needs another miracle. Could be another miracle will probably allow him to refocus. But that's not really what is needed. Because a Yid, is always shalom in Emunas Hashem. He's always 100% complete in his faith to God. But what he needs is just to put things in perspective. I am a maimin. These Sveikus and Emunah, these doubts in Emunah, is just another signal of the Yetzer Hara. So what do I do? Just like when the Yetzer Hara says, do that, speak that, look there, I turn the other way around. And I don't do what the Yetzer Hara says. Similarly, when he sends a suffix, when he sends a doubt in my faith, I just have to bring him down. I just got to open up a light, which will dispel that darkness, and all of a sudden, I will see everything. Or everything which was there a minute ago will come just to the surface, will come to full state of manifestation. Because I don't need to do anything new. This is who I am. A Yid is a maimin ben maimin. So he says from this, all this what we learned in this chapter, and in this again, this particular story, the episode of the Meraglim, what we could learn, limud kol adam, everybody could learn, when in his thoughts enters doubts on faith, it's just expressions and presentations of the evil force levat. Solely that, which rises on his soul, tries to triumph, tries to overtake his pure Edel's soul, which is a nefesh, a soul which is part and parcel of God, which never has doubts and emunah of Hashem. Not only doesn't have that, it is part and parcel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Does God have faith about Hashem? Obviously He does. He is God. And the Yid has a part of God. It's a pasuk in Torah. As the pasuk says in Tanakh, Nefesh chelik lekamimal. A Yid is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So by definition, it is a maimin. And when a person has Sveikus and Emunah, doubts and his belief, and his genuine belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's just messages of the Sitra Achra. By definition, you really don't need a miracle to counter that. Like in the story of the Meraglim, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't show them a miracle. And by definition, we hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu again does with His part to make it easier for us to remove that layer of obscurity which blocks and covers the purity of our souls. So we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu at times to show us an overt miracle, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ready to do it for us, and He does it for us on a constant basis. He wants to do more for us as long as we let Him in. But by definition, to get rid of that, to override and overcome those Sveikus and Emunah, the doubts of and belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you just put things in perspective. It's just another dosage of darkness which settled on the purity of your nefesh, of your soul. Open the light and dispel the darkness. You remain with the same healthy emunah as a Yid, a Jew, which is a maimin ben maimin. Al Yisrael atzmon, as he says, but the Yid himself, maminin. Believers b'nei maminin. And more than that, here the Alter Rebbe, and this will conclude the chapter, here the Alter Rebbe introduces something very interesting. And he says, not only Yid is a maimin, so guess what? The Sitra Achra, the pure forces, also have no doubts about the Yechelis, about the absolute omniscient Kayach of strength and Yechelis and ability of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The omniscient powers of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It doesn't have any doubt at all. The Sitra Achra itself. And the only thing is, we'll just try to say it orally before we final the text. It says that it just has the mandate and mission to confuse the Yid in his Avodas Hashem. So, and Alter Rebbe brings the famous, like Zohar HaKodesh, it says an interesting Zohar, that the king wanted to test his prince, his royal prince, and to see his loyalty towards the king, towards his palace, etc., or towards the monarchy, the healthy monarchy of the king, and again in the environment. So the king presents, takes a zona, which is literally translated as a harlot, and tells the harlot to persuade the child, the son, to see if he's going to maintain his loyalty or not. So it says so the harlot itself knows about the koach, knows about the koach of the king, or the prestige of the king and royalty, the monarch, etc. It knows very well, and it has no doubt, and in a sense, it's loyal to the king as well. But the only thing is, it had a particular mandate, to persuade the prince to extract the loyalty of the prince, or to test and examine the loyalty of the prince. So the harlot itself is very loyal to the king, and it knows very much about the king, and it knows as much about the king as much as the son knows about his father, as the prince knows about the king. The only thing unfortunately, it's sent with a mandate to persuade, to try to test and examine the child, this prince, to see if the child is loyal to the king. and unfortunately, the presentation on the surface is something which challenges the loyalty of the prince to the king. And there's more than that. What does the Zayna herself? What does she want? In essence, she also wants that the prince should overcome her seduction. That the prince should overcome her presentation and say no to her, and continue and maintain a steadfast loyalty to the monarchy. She also wants that. But on the surface, she presents herself in such a way that is really enticing, and in really testing, and really challenging to the prince. So she knows very well, and she's a very loyal messenger, which is again all about her. If you look at it in essence, all about her is a complete expression of loyalty to the king. But on the surface, the veneer, on the externality, the external layer, which means her presentation is completely antithesis to what the king stands for. But namely, she's only here to test the child. And again, the second step over here, and he points this out in the Zohar, that she herself wants and is so eager that the child, the prince, should overcome this test, overcome this temptation, and ultimately, when the prince will do so, deep down, even though on the surface she's presenting something totally different, deep down, she has this inner contentment, an inner calm that the prince has not gave in, is not succumbed to this temptation, and does maintain the loyalty to the palace, to the king, whatever the king stands for. This is the mashal in Zohar. Similarly, the Zohar says that the Sitra Achra, the presentations of the impure forces, they also have no doubts. It's not only the Yid is a Maimin ben Maimin. The Sitra Achra knows where things are at. The only thing is, it's given a mandate to confuse and to camouflage and to confuse the Yid in his Avodas Hashem. But again, the whole point where HaKadosh Baruch Hu does this, why does the Eibishter allow the Yetzer Hara to be so present in our life in the end of the day, which is not the subject directly over here, is because he wants to give, that he wants Avodas Hashem should come from us. This is part of the mandate of making Kodesh Baruch Hu Dira B'Tachteinim, an abode in this lowly world, that it comes from the Tachteinim. We're not programmed from above like the angels and so on. We're not programmed above just to do good. The Kodesh Baruch Hu wants it to come from us, and the only way it can come from us is when the Kodesh Baruch Hu allows a Yetzer Hara, he gives us, each one of us, a Yetzer Hara, and allows the evil forces to present a different picture and a different image, an eclipse on the truth. So when we do what we have to do, it's coming from us. It's our choice, and that's part of, again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's master plan. So in this case, and again, directly we're dealing over here, Hashem gives the reshus, gives the ability, or gives the permission, like in the mashal, like in the previous parable, gives the permission for the Sitra Achra, the level of impure, for the impure forces to persuade and to blur the Emes Hashem from the Yid, individually and collectively to Am Yisrael. But what is the Sitra Achra true? The Sitra Achra on its own, that has no doubt of the greatness and the ability, the koyach, the Koach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Has no doubt. And the second step as well, it is so determined, or rather, it is so eager, better word, it is so eager that the Jew ultimately stands steadfast and brings it down and opens the light and dispels its own darkness and demonstrates the true clarity. And in this case of Emunus Hashem, believe in God and everything which is aligned with believe in God, and again to the Yid, his complete, steadfast devotion and with constancy of his commitment rather, of his learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, davening and doing mitzvahs, etc. So let's see it inside. It says the negative forces also don't have any doubts. Actually, need to know it's given the permission to distract the person, to confuse the person with sheker or mirma, words of lie, and words of disillusion, words of swindle, with words of swindle. But in the end, laharbe schore. He does mention this idea, which we mentioned before, to increase in reward, which the Yid has so much reward. Besides, he wants to come from the Yid, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it goes together. When it comes from the Yid with his own freedom of choice, despite these confusions, and despite where these presentations of lie and swindle, the Yid stands steadfast as Emunus Hashem, and again, whatever comes together with Emunus Hashem. So this is Lahar B'Schorei, HaKadosh Baruch Hu increases in his reward. Like the temptation, or the presentations of temptation, like the words and the words of capture, which the Zaina, the harlot, tries to capture and seduce the Ben HaMelech, the prince of the king, b'sheker or mirma. In other words, her words, her swindly words, or a presentation of lie and a presentation of swindle, and ultimately she does it b'shus hamelech, with a complete okay and permission and mandate, if you will, of the king, like it says in Zeira Kodesh. But she herself knows that she's a shliach, she's a messenger of the king, and in the end of the day, if it's about the king, she deep down is so interested, nothing less than interested, and more so than eager, that the prince stands steadfast and overcomes these temptations, overcomes these tests. And similarly, in this case, the Sitra Achra so desires, it knows about the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the reason why it presents on the surface a presentation which is so antithesis to the genuine sanctity, or the divinity and sanctity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is just because that is its mandate. But because it knows that it's its mandate, in other words, at the end of the day, it's a mandate given by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it itself wants that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should prevail, and in this case, God should prevail, and in this case, the Yid should overcome all these challenges, may it be as sveikis and doubts and emunah, or any other challenges. And he stands again with complete determination and resolute to stand b'simcha v'tuv levov, with joy and elation and gladness of heart, in his Aveda, in his Emunah, in believing God, in his Avedas Hashem, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, gmilus chasadim, davening, etc. Have a wonderful day.